All right, last time that we talked, we were working with gesture drawing where we're trying to capture a really quick, spontaneous pose in a short period of time. We said gesture drawings could be as short as 30 seconds, as long as about 2 minutes or so. It's a good way to warm up. After you've warmed up with those gesture drawings, then it's a time to kind of move into trying to draw an actual human figure. Now, you may have remembered me talking to you about proportions. Proportion is that principle of design that says that proportion is the relationship of one part to another part or to the whole thing. And at the beginning of the year, when we were talking about the principles of design, we said that the average human adult is about 7.5 heads tall. In other words, if you took their head and you used it as a ruler instead of a measuring stick, and you counted all the way down from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet, it'd be about 7.5 heads tall. Some art books will say 8, but it's pretty close in range there. Ultimately, whenever you're drawing, you're not necessarily going by a formula. You're actually citing the size of the person's head to their entire body, or the size of their head compared to maybe their shoulder to the tip of their fingers, trying to get an idea of how to control the proportions. In some superhero, how to draw superhero books, comic book characters, they'll say that maybe regular men and women are a certain number of heads tall, whereas maybe someone who's a superhero might be taller. Like maybe if a man is 7.5 heads tall, maybe the superhero is 9 to 10 heads tall, depending on the build of that figure. Well, today I'm going to demonstrate for you. I'm not going to finish it 100%, but I'm going to show you how to draw a human figure, how you would work with that. And when I start drawing it, I don't necessarily go pure gesture, but I do start really, really lightly. I don't sit there and try to draw everything perfectly as I go. I start off very, very lightly, and I look for shapes. Now, in a lot of art books and art videos, they'll talk about how there's some easy ways that you can start. Like some of them will recommend using kind of a stick figure approach, and then looking for obviously an oval for the head, and looking for circles and joints like shoulders and elbows, wrists, maybe even hip points, or using simple shapes. And this isn't bad. This is one technique that can work well for some people. Some people go a little further and they make them very geometric. When they make their figures, they make them into like boxes and spheres, and I'm not saying that this won't work. I'll probably use a combination of several factors, but I probably won't go full geometric. I'll probably go for more loose, elongated shapes at first, and then develop to a figure. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to see how many heads tall my particular figure is. If I take my pencil and put it at the top of his head and pinch the pencil put my finger right where his chin is, I go 1 head, 2 heads, 3 heads. It's very important to remember where you were. Okay, 4 heads, 5 heads, 6 heads. It's about 7 on this particular pose. Now, how many heads tall the person is? Well, it depends. If you're looking at them head on, it's going to be pretty normal. But if they are leaning toward you or away from you, that's going to totally change proportion. That's why it's so important to use something like the head to compare. So we're going to have 7 equal lengths. Now, I don't know how to divide this into 7ths. I really don't. So what I'm probably going to do, I could take my pencil and just make some guesses, but what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to make a loose shape. I'll make it a little darker than I normally would on my paper, like that. And I'm just going to see if I can get 7 of these on the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 takes me off the page. So I'm going to have to make his head either higher or a little smaller. What if I take his head and I made it higher, like this? Would this work? So maybe even before you even draw the entire shape of the head, maybe just say, I want to try to draw the head from here to here. Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yeah. So that's where the feet are going to be. So now I've kind of got a range. The head won't fit in here. So to save yourself a little bit of time, instead of scribbling that circle right away, maybe just do this. Just put a couple of marks there where you think the head will be. And I'm just going to put in something loose, like a little egg shape like that. I'm not going to worry about getting perfect or fancy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest a little bit of a neck, just a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of like suggest the chest. I'm going to come down a little bit. I'm going to look for maybe shoulder points. And before I get too far into this, what may be helpful for me is as I do this, maybe take his head and just see 1, 2. It's about 2 heads from about bicep to, well, not bicep, but the shoulder muscles right here. So if I take this and I say, okay, it's from about here to here, that's about right. So I'm pretty close. So as I go in, I kind of start really loose at first. I don't worry about trying to be perfect. I kind of suggest, if I want to suggest a little bit of the shoulder shape, I can. As far as the length from shoulder to elbow, again, I can take the head and I can kind of say, okay, how about here? Okay, one head is about to here. So if I say that's about here, measure the head over on my drawing here, come out and say, okay, that's about where the elbow ought to be. And I don't necessarily have to sight on this side. If the elbows line up, and it looks like they do, I can just come over here and say, okay, it's going to be out to about here too. And I can take this angle and kind of help myself just a little bit. But I can sight each one, because sometimes the figure won't be posing their arms identically. Sometimes one may be doing a different thing. So it's always a good idea to take the head and measure and compare. So I come on in, I'm kind of using kind of a gestural element. I'm going to use a little sighting for the angle, which we learned about earlier in the semester. Come in and say, okay, it's going to be kind of like this. This is not necessarily size, but just more like shape. One thing I'm going to check is if this is where it joins. I know his chest is going to be bigger and his waist is going to be a little smaller, at least on this particular figure. It's not always the case. I'm going to suggest this just a little bit. Again, sight. Kind of get the idea. It's easier to draw a person from paper than it is from real life. And by doing this real lightly, you don't have to get all caught up and really uptight about things. I'm going to look at where this joins. I'm going to take the head, and I'm going to say, okay, maybe from like the empty space, the negative space right here. One head, 2 heads takes me to a little bit below the chin. So if I go from, take the head, 1, 2, it's a little off, and let's try it one more time. Let's take the head, go 1, 2, takes me into the middle of the hand. So if I come here, 1, 2, it should be about the middle of the hand. So the middle hand is about right here. Actually, I was pretty close. There's the hand. I'm not going to worry about the fingers just yet. As I look over here, it's very similar, so that's not a problem. Come in. And like I said, you don't have to draw with me if you don't want to. I mean, you can if you feel like it'll help you practice. You're going to have your own figure to do. The shirt I know is going to be just a little bit below the hand, like so. Let's see if I'm on track. I'm going to measure the distance from, how many heads does it take to get from his head to his shirt line. 1, 2, 3, about 3.5. So let's see how did I do over here. 1, 2, 3.5. Yeah, so far I'm on track. Probably the next good place would be like the knee. The knee's about here. So how many heads would it take to get to the knee? And I'm going to try to compare it over here too. So I take my pencil, measure the head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5.5 it looks like. So if I come over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5's about here. So the knees are going to be about here. The knee, if I go straight up with my pencil, his knee, where he's posed, lines up about here. So if I come straight down from the shoulder right here, come straight down, this is where the knee ought to be. I can lightly suggest that. I can look at this, kind of get a loose shape. I could do, cylinders if I wanted to, like where his legs would, like an action figure, like where his legs would join in right here. I know that his feet are going to be down here. I could go ahead and start taking that down and suggesting that. There's a little bit for shoe. The feet have kind of got a weird perspective. I'll deal with that in a minute. So come in, kind of suggest that. In a little bit, I'll use the negative space to help me. I'll go ahead and work over here the same way. Come out. Look at the negative space just a little bit to help. Knees kind of here. I kind of made it look like it was bowed out. I think his leg's probably a little straighter than that. But again, it should line up about here. Come on down. Again, the foot kind of does a weird perspective thing. So now what I've kind of got the general pose of him down. basic proportions. If I was concerned about anything, I could double check, and then I can come back in and start doing a few more details. I'm not going to probably be perfect at this. I want to go brief, but I'm going to start looking at the contours a little bit, maybe get a little pickier about some of my line choices. I'm going to look at the shape of the negative space here to kind of help me. I'll leave the fingers alone for now. Deal with those tiny details later. So right now, just trying to capture the general shape of the shirt. Paying attention where it curves in and where it curves out. Okay, like so. I won't put in every wrinkle yet, but I might put in a couple here and there. I can come over here and say, okay, I want to kind of suggest a shirt. I could have waited till later on this. I probably should have focused on the limbs, but come on over. Do the same thing over here. Pay attention to the contour of the lines. Pay attention to the shape. His elbow's out a bit. Comes around. Pay attention to those couple little bumps and curves that are in there. I can come in and get more, a little fancier later. Again, looking at the shape of the negative space to help me. Chest comes in on this guy, comes on down into his hands. Deal with the hands later. Might want to suggest a little bit of his chest, just a tiny bit. I won't get caught up in the face just yet, but there are some light things I could do, like that neck should be a little thicker. I could lightly suggest this right now. Remember, the eye line is halfway down. That's a tricky one that people forget. I'm not going to worry about getting every detail in right now. I'll come back in later and get fancier with his face, but I can suggest it for now. Come back on down into the body. Here's the shirt. Pay attention to how it curves as it goes along. There's a little bit of a ridge here. I'll come back and get a little fancier later. Come back into the pants. Look at the actual shape. Focus on the pants. Don't worry about the shoes just yet. Look at the cuffs and how they change. Remember, these clothes, they fall on the figure. There's a couple of folds here that can kind of help suggest where the knee ought to be. Sometimes the seam of the pants can do the same thing. Look at the shape of the negative space. Look at the shape of this white space that is trapped in between the legs. That will help a lot right here. Sorry if the camera's freezing a little bit. Trying to wait when I catch that. I can always go back in and adjust. That's why we do it in pencil. A bit of cuff, come up. Again, he's got a knee, so use some of that, the suggestion of those wrinkles to get that in. Remember some of the things you learned in the modified contour. Suggest pants right there. A few wrinkles we can add in. Let's go down to the shoes. The shoes, the feet aren't turned to us perfectly, so we draw what we see. We draw this weird shape. There's a bit of a bump. And I tell you what, I'm just going to focus on the shoe as it goes along the sole. Comes in, goes up, comes over, runs right here. There's the heel. That's pretty easy to draw. Got it. And let's draw the shape that I see. Add that in. That's enough for now. A little bit of a toe there to kind of show that's coming out toward us. Come over here, same thing. Boom, boom. Where the sole comes in, comes down, up and over. Sole, there's a little bit of a line here. I just draw what I see as I see it, best as I can. And sometimes the drawing won't provide you a lot of detail with what the shoes look like. On yours, I kind of like for you, when you do your figure, to go ahead and do details, do a little bit of light value. Let's go ahead and deal with the hands. What I'm going to do is first, I'm going to just kind of draw just the general shape of the hand itself, like so. Then I can just start off with a single line for the fingers at first if I want to, but then I can go in and suggest. Remember that fingers, they have bones in them, like we talked about earlier in the year. Usually 3 bones per finger. If it's the thumbs, it's going to be 2. Pay attention to which ones are longer and which ones are shorter. Just kind of get a suggestion there. You can come back in later, get more detail, do a little more shading. Come in over here. Here's the hand, comes in. Pinky comes on down. Index finger, middle finger. And again, it's going to be up to you to do the details. But I think we've given you kind of a general idea how to kind of go about it. You can come back in and play around more with fingernails and things like that. We're using smaller sheets of paper. You can come in and add some shading later and make it look a little more three-dimensional. We'd like for you to do that. Just remember some of the rules of the portrait. When you're drawing it, it even helps to sight it. And sometimes in the photograph, depending on the angle of the model, where the camera was in relation to the model, it may not quite follow the proportions that we gave you earlier. But when you do these, I want you to make them look finished at the end, best as you can. Okay? Not perfection, but we do want it to look finished. So do the very, very best that you can. And I think that we've given you a basic idea on how to start and how you could finish. And so best wishes and happy drawing.